All right, welcome to Afternoon Tea with Docs. I am Dr. Erica. I'm a GP from the West Midlands, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Linda, emergency medicine doctor from Sheffield, and we're both lifestyle medicine physicians.
Oh, it's wonderful. So wonderful to see so many of our recurring guests. Hello, Monica. Hello, Janet and Vasudha. So lovely to see you again. And to see so many new faces join today once again. We would love to get to know you all. Do share away. Let us know where you are from. What is your favorite hot or cold cup of tea? And of course, we would love to know what lifestyle changes would you like us to help you with to live a long and fulfilling life. We dedicate each month to covering a different health topic, and July is Cancer Month. We are discussing lifestyle changes that can help to prevent, treat, and reverse different types of cancers. And on the last Sunday of every month, you can tune in to hear Empowering Patient Success Story series, where we share how patients use lifestyle medicine principles and nutrition to improve resistance and facilitate recovery.
We host Afternoon Tea with Docs every Sunday at 5 p.m. UK time, where you can connect with world-renowned lifestyle medicine experts like our guest today, Professor Robert Thomas. Each afternoon tea event is divided into two parts, and the first hour is a live interview accessible to all on Zoom, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, where we debunk misinformation on healthy lifestyle practices and aim to share 3 actionable takeaways that you can implement in your life right away to start beating modern lifestyle diseases such as heart disease, lifestyle-related cancers, diabetes, obesity, and many, many more. And the second half of our event is only accessible to those who have joined us on Zoom. And it is a cozy, non-recorded half hour where you can get to know the Afternoon Tea with Docs community, speak to us and our lifestyle medicine experts about your health goals in a safe and private environment.
If you're ready to implement your health goals, join our free membership on our website to be part of our supportive community to learn and implement evidence-based healthy lifestyle habits to live a long and fulfilling life.
Professor Robert Thomas is a full-time NHS consultant oncologist at Bedford and Addenbrooke's hospitals, a teacher at Cambridge University and a visiting professor of sports and nutritional science at the University of Bedfordshire. He manages patients with chemotherapy, radiotherapy, hormones and biological targeted treatments, but incorporates nutritional and lifestyle strategies to enhance their effect, reduce side effects, and improve outcomes. He is also head of a lifestyle and cancer research unit, which designs and conducts government-approved scientific studies evaluating the impact of exercise, diet, and natural therapies on cancer and other chronic diseases. The scientific papers resulting from this research conducted in collaborations with universities in Southern California, Cambridge, and Glasgow can be reviewed online. He previously led the UK Polybalm and POMI-T randomized studies and currently leads the UK COVID-19 nutritional intervention study, the Phyto-V study, assessing whether prebiotic polyphenol-rich foods plus the Your Gut Plus probiotic could lower the severity of duration of symptoms. He's also the author of the UK bestseller How to Live and has been awarded the British Oncology Association Oncologist of the Year and Royal College of Radiologists Research Medal. One of our favourite quotes from Prof is from his book, How to Live. We are all born with tendency to get ill. It is part of us. So instead of asking why me when we develop a serious illness, we should perhaps be asking why not me when we don't. Welcome, Prof.
Welcome, Professor Thomas.
Thanks for having me on the show.
It's fantastic to have you here with us. And we come together over a hot cup of tea every Sunday to share a story. And in light of what we would love to learn more about you, we would love to know more about your story. And how did you decide to go into medicine from the beginning?
Oh, no, you're going right back a long time ago. Well, I went to school in a comprehensive school in the valleys of South Wales. And to be honest, we didn't know about all these courses you get in universities these days. If you went to university, you did law, engineering, or medicine, and that was it. And writing's not my great point, so that excluded law. And engineering looked too difficult, so I ended up being a doctor. So I'm afraid there's nothing more clever than that. But you know, a lot of these decisions in life, you just go with the flow, don't you? It's like, why do you end up being a GP? Why do you end up being a casualty officer? A job comes up, it's good. I'm glad I became an oncologist because it's a very exciting specialty. But I didn't know that when I went into it.
Absolutely, we always start with an idea and we let it roll. We go with life and see where it takes us. And would love to know what took you to learning about lifestyle and nutrition in treating patients with cancer. What was the initial thought that got you rolling down this path?
Well, I suppose it's all about patient empowerment. When I first became a consultant in Bedford and Cambridge 20 years ago, the clinics were very overfilled. You know, you were having tiny 2-minute consultations on complicated cases of cancer. So the first thing I did back then was start doing patient information materials, which seems obvious now, but 20 years ago, there were no leaflets or videos or websites giving patients help so they could empower themselves in the decision-making process. So I did an unusual trial where I randomized giving patients information about their cancer treatments or not. And surprisingly enough, it showed a significant benefit if you tell patients what's going to happen to them. You know, it seems obvious now, but back then it wasn't. And that was before cancer backup and Macmillan even existed. So I was always keen to provide patients information so they can empower themselves. They feel they're in control of the decisions and the path ahead of them. So that was the initial stages. And obviously that became mainstream now. I mean, everyone gets information, thank goodness, and they get separate consultation with nurses. But then following that, the area which I found patients were most in the dark about was lifestyle, nutrition, because they were getting very conflicting stories from other doctors. They were reading the newspapers, and some were saying, need to be a vegan, other people saying you need to eat lots of meat. The nurses were saying, don't worry about gaining weight during your chemo because you lose it afterwards. And I felt that patients were getting very frustrated. So we started looking at lifestyle and diet and tried to do information about that, and then realized there was lots of gaps in the knowledge. So started doing evidence reviews on the world literature, and then asking patients themselves. So we have a lot of studies where we ask patients about why they want to change, how they're willing to change, what will prompt them to change their behavior, and then ultimately designing randomized trials to prove that, say, exercise or a certain dietary intervention is worthwhile, because it's not that easy to change your lifestyle. So it ultimately is to give patients the power so they can help themselves.
Re-empowering our patients is key, especially now during this pandemic of both chronic diseases and COVID-19, which we have seen. But before we go deeper into this empowering subject, I must ask you about the headlines that came up in 2017, especially since tea is UK's most beloved drink. The headline stated, "Tea causes cancer."
Absolutely.
And you took the time and the resources and the effort to look at the statistics and rerun them to see if tea is actually a carcinogen. And we would love to know if here in Afternoon Tea, if we are good for the nation.
Yeah, no, that was I suppose it reflects a defect in my personality, but I was rang actually by a doctor from Minneapolis who said, look, I've done a study which shows that tea causes cancer. And I did the reason why he rang me, because I did a food supplement study called the Pommy Tea Study, which included tea as one of the ingredients. So, it didn't sort of add up, because our study showed that supplement had anti-cancer properties. So I sort of looked at his paper, and he'd grouped isoflavones in it was a basic. I'll go back a step. It was a data set of 155,000 people. They followed for 15 years, and you can ask that data set a question like, if you smoked, are you more likely to get cancer? If you had sugar, and one of the questions he asked was, do isoflavin-rich foods cause prostate cancer or other cancers? Now, isoflavin-rich foods are things like soya, chickpeas, and he put tea in that group, which is odd because tea doesn't really have many isoflavins, and there's very small traces of them. It's certainly not estrogenic. So it was odd that it was even included in that group, and it was only one of 10 different foods anyway. So it was one of my bugbears that a journalist will then take a very small part of the paper and make it a headline. So if you're a member of the public, you will see tea causes cancer. Clearly there was no correlation anyway statistically, and even if it was a very tiny part of the overall paper. So I sort of pondered for a while. Then you can get hold of these data sets. You can import them from California. It takes a year of bureaucracy to get them, but I thought, well, I'm not having it that the drink we love at 5 o'clock every Sunday in your show is going to be branded as a carcinogen from now on. And you get that all over the press. I mean, journalists will take what they think sells the newspaper, and that was the story they wanted. So I thought the only way to do this is to rerun the data set. And we begged around for a statistician who'd help us. I mean, the data, and we had to transfer the data at night, and it took an hour to get across because there's so much data. And we got the biostatistics department of Glasgow University to help us. So we're very much in debt to them. It was an enormous project. It seems simple because you have to cross-correlate everything. So, do tea drinkers, smoke more, or do tea drinkers exercise less, or are they more overweight, or, do they eat less broccoli? So we had to factor in all those other factors. And we were very pleased to find out, thank goodness, after all that work, that there was a slight improvement in a reduced risk of prostate cancer if you drank tea. And it was not just 1 cup, if you drank a lot of tea. In fact, the more tea you drank, the less prostate cancer you got, marginally. So I can reassure you all, if you're sipping your tea now, that it was not true, and the headline should be, you have a cup of, if you drink tea, you're going to reduce your risk slightly of prostate cancer. And there was a trend with other cancers as well, like breast cancer, but the biggest effect was prostate, actually, which would fit with our POMI tea study, which had tea in it. So it took 4 years to get that, but I'm glad.
Wow. 4 years. Thank you so much. But I do feel much better now to hear this. But wow,
we're trying to
4
get it
years.
Published, but it's I think we're getting through the British Journal of Nutrition, but it's a slow process getting things like that published. So anyway, we presented it in ASCO, so we've got an abstract. We just got to get the full publication now.
Fantastic. Well, we can't wait to read it. And thank you very much. We are greatly indebted to you for this, and to everybody involved. So then I have to ask, what is your favorite hot cup of tea?
I just like English breakfast tea. I'm old fashioned. If I go on holiday, I'm one of these very sad people who take a little plastic bag with tea bags in it. But I do. I mean, if I'm offered a tea, I'll drink what I'm given, but I do try to get the tea bags without plastic in them.
Absolutely. And we will go on that in a minute, because you had a fantastic chapter in your book on plastic and toxins in our food. But let's start in the beginning. And in your lovely book, How to Live, it's a fantastic book. If you guys haven't read it yet, highly recommend it. In How to Live, you start with a very poignant subject, and it's genetics. And we often say here in Afternoon Tea that genetics are not our destiny. And I loved your chapter on it, where you address that I quote, "We cannot change the genes we are dealt, but we can change the way we look after them. We are not on a predetermined road to an inevitable destiny, and do not have to accept our genetic fortunes. So how come? Why do we have so much power over our genes?
Well, in the paragraph before that chapter, I did preempt it with, there are some people who are born with very horrible genetic mutations and, have childhood illnesses. We're not talking about that group. We're talking about genes which predict a higher risk of chronic diseases such as diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, rather than the obvious genetic mutation. So let's not be let's not get away with the fact if you're born with those terrible genes, it's bad. The CRUK estimated that about 50% of cancers are definitely the genes you're born with, and about another 50% are probably lifestyle related. I would say actually it's you have more influence than 50%. I would say it's higher because those statistics tend to look at just the obvious things like being overweight, smoking, etc. Whereas if you take into account certain dietary elements, I think you can have more control. But it is true, if you have vulnerable genes, it could be that you're going to get cancer anyway, just even if you live the life of an angel. But lifestyle may put it back later in life. And also there is quite a lot of evidence that the types of cancer you get tend to be more treatable and less aggressive. So you can influence that. And likewise, you can get some people with very robust genes, of course, and they're the people who sit there at 90 saying, I've smoked and drank all my life and I've never had cancer. They've just had very lucky genes. But for the rest of us in the middle, we can have a significant influence on our risks of cancer, the type of cancers we get, and whether you're going to be cured from them.
It's really empowering to know that we do have control over those genes that are lifestyle and nutrition susceptible. So if we look at our immune system, I think it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. What is our immune system? And from your book, you stated that up to, I think, 30,000 mutated cells are being checked and held in control with our immune system. So there are mutations that are happening on a daily basis, and our DNA is being repaired by our immune system. And we ought to protect our immune system and support our immune system in this crucial biological mechanism. So could we ask you a little bit about what is innate and adaptive immune system for our audience, and what happens when it goes wrong?
Okay, do you mind if I go back just a step? I mean, it's a technical thing, but
absolutely.
The DNA repair and damage to DNA is actually not the immune system. So we have, we are destined to get cancer every day. So if you go for a bike ride or an exercise run, you generate free radicals. If you eat a bit of burnt meat, you generate free radicals, or just they can develop spontaneously. They damage your DNA. They cause rearrangements of your DNA. And when DNA gets rearranged, then these genes which we're born with, which have been suppressed by other strips of DNA, become they become relocated and they start growing and they form cancer cells. Within your cell, on a daily basis, we fix those. We have DNA repair pathways, and the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes are related to those. And we fix the genes within our cells. If we can't fix it, the cell commits suicide called apoptosis. Okay, so that's actually not immunity, but it's a cellular defense, which some people brand as immunity, but it's not technically immunity. Immunity is then if your cancer cells, if those mutations develop into early cancer cells, which they do every few minutes in your body, then that goes into the bloodstream. So then you have a cancer cell. Now, the immunity, if you're lucky, will spot that cell and say that's not a normal cell. That's a mutated cell, and I will attack that cell and I will kill it. And that would be part of the innate immune system. So your natural killer cells, which are these white cells in your bloodstream, will recognize it as foreign and kill it, and that's immunity. Now we know that people with immune deficiency, such as AIDS or genetic conditions where you get an inferior immunity, those patients, as well as infection, develop cancers. You know, people who've had renal transplants, for example, they have a very high risk of cancer. People who have AIDS have cancer. So when I was an AIDS oncologist back in the 80s, most of the patients had cancer eventually because their immune system was low. So it's not a surprise that if you have problems with your immunity or you live a lifestyle which causes damage to your immunity, you're going to get an increased risk of cancer. And these days, a lot of cancer treatments, biological cancer treatments, are actually using the immune system to fight cancer. So if you have an impaired immunity, you're not going to respond to the new drugs we're using. So immunity, as you say, is a very important thing. And just going back to your question, the innate system is the first line of defense. It's non-specific. So we have an infection or we have a cancer, it just dishes out these natural killer cells, inflammation, which keep it at bay in time for the sort of longer immune system to recognize and to develop antibodies, and then recognize and store those antibodies in our marrow, and they're the ones who would actually finish the job off. So the innate is to contain it, and the other immunity is to actually then kill it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you for clarifying that. And if we move on from that, what happens when our immune system goes wrong? When we see allergies, there's a huge rise in allergies in children and early adults, autoimmune diseases and immune deficiency. And then if we can go into chronic inflammation and how to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, people always think I need to boost my immunity. It's not a particularly good term, because if our immunity is too strong, that can be a problem as well. So you're right. So when it goes wrong, we can have immune deficiency. So if you're taking chemotherapy or steroids or an infection, you then don't recognize infections. So you're more likely to get infections regularly, and you're more likely to get cancer. If you've gone the other way and your immune system is too alert, you can then start attacking your own body. So the innate immunity, which creates an inflammation, it sends in histamine and natural killer cells into tissues. You know, as a sideline of that, it actually starts damaging your own tissues. So things like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, inflammatory bowel disease, diabetes type 1, they all related to your body's immune system attacking your own tissue. And there's an interesting story about diabetes type 1 now. They think there's actually a strong link with gut health, and a toxin comes through into the bloodstream. Your body sees that toxin, but that toxin is very similar to pancreatic islet cells, and your body sends out an immune attack against it, and it actually ends up killing your own pancreas, and you become diabetic. So you can get lots of chronic diseases. And of course, in the longer term, we're going to talk about chronic inflammation. You can just have a lifestyle and a diet and maybe environmental issues, which is just your body's just sensing it's under attack, and it's just every day the upregulating your innate immunity. So it's sending out these cells into your bloodstream. So it's like driving a car with your foot on the brake and the accelerator. You're just overheating and you're not going anywhere fast, is the analogy I like to use.
Mm-hmm. And this foot on the accelerator is this visual. It's so strong for how we live in the Western world right now. I think we are overeating, we're overworking, and we are not putting our own well-being in front because of societal pressures, as well as prices are going up. We always want to achieve more, and but unfortunately, we have to remember that our bodies weren't meant to be in chronic inflammation, in constant stress 24/7. So you wrote in your book about chronic inflammation that the Western diet and lifestyle kind of constantly exposes the body to environmental hazards. And you described it that it misleads the body into thinking that it is under continued and vigorous attack from pathogens. As a result, the body does not switch off its innate immune defense. And this lack of downtime leads to an unhealthy state of chronic inflammation. So what is it that causes this chronic inflammation in more detail?
Yeah, well, there's lots of factors. Yeah, exactly. So we mustn't get away with the fact we need inflammation. If we get stung by a bee or we eat some food with bacteria, and we need an acute inflammatory response, but we need it to switch off when we don't need it. And well, there's lots of things. You can be exposed to chemicals on our skin. You can eat chemicals which your body recognizes as foreign. Your gut health is probably the biggest factor. If you eat a diet, which most people, over 60% in the UK eat diets which cause inflammation in the gut, and they damage the natural microflora of the gut, so you end up getting overgrowth of inflammatory bacteria. It causes inflammation in the gut wall. You get the gut cells opening up and you get gaps coming through, and there's a condition called leaky gut syndrome. It's not particularly a medical term, but it does describe it. And then what happens is you get then toxins coming into your bloodstream, which previously with a good gut you wouldn't get. You get nutrients leaking out as well at the same time. And then your innate system recognizes them for them, and it sets up a response to them. And as you just said, that those inflammatory cytokines are going around your body, then they start attacking your joints, they cross the blood-brain barrier and cause fatigue. They lead to an increased risk of neurodegenerative conditions such as Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's. They create amyloid, which is a response to chronic inflammation. So the fundamental thing is the damage to the gut in the first place, but also not exercising, having too much sugar in your diet, because sugar crosses the gut very quickly. It releases insulin, and then too much insulin actually creates a bit of inflammation as well. So there's a number of factors. Being overweight, or if you have lots of skin folds with infection in and things like that, that can have a grumbling skin infection, can create an inflammation. So the list is quite extensive, but gut health is the most important.
And you highlighted how these inflammatory chemicals called cytokines particularly can directly signal cancer cells to divide faster and spread. So there's a clear link between inflammation, the cytokine release, and an increase of cancer cell division. That was really powerful, I thought, to think that if we just decrease that inflammation, we will be able to slow down, and that slowing down of cancer division will also allow our body to attack and possibly eliminate those cancer cells before they can develop into a full-blown cancer, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a quirk of nature that inflammatory cytokines also cause cancer cells to proliferate faster. Because they're not meant to be there 24 hours. I mean, usually they come in for a few hours every few days. But the other thing is when your immune system's on hyperdrive every day, you're actually using up some of the important cells. So your immune surveillance goes down as well. So you get a double-edged sword. You get less ability to recognize foreign cells. And when you do recognize them, you do this inappropriate excess inflammation, which actually ends up causing proliferation of cancer cells at the same time. So it's not a good situation to be in.
And you mentioned that they cause free radicals, and these free radicals cause increased oxidative stress, which as we have learned, can cause DNA damage and encourage existing cancer cells to mutate even more.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, a state of inflammation is one of the factors which cause excess free radical formation. I mean, there's lots of things which cause that, but and that would not affect the immunity, but as you say, it's affecting the DNA, and if cells are proliferating faster. And it's one of the reasons why when you have, say, cancer of the esophagus, it always starts in hypertrophy. Now, hypertrophy is where the cells just grow they're on top of each other. There's not a single layer of cells. There might be 10 layers thick, because your acid and your diet is stimulating your esophagus. So your cells then divide faster, and they create an inflammation within them. And that combination of inflammation and dividing faster means that cancers develop spontaneously. So if a cancer if a cell is cycling 20 times faster than it needs to, then it's 20 times more likely to develop a mutation and form a cancer. So that's why hypertrophy is a prelude to cancer itself.
Mm-hmm. And we have a great question in the chat about exercise and free radicals that fit in perfectly here. And can we ask, how does exercise affect free radicals and this stress response?
Yeah, I mean, we mustn't forget that free radicals are generated spontaneously, and we do need them. It's part of how the apoptosis pathway works, which is one of the things that kills cancer cells. When you produce, if you remember, I mean, you're closer to medical school than me, but if you remember your oxidative phosphorylation pathway, which is the pathway which creates energy, which feeds cells, a byproduct of that is free radicals, which you then get enzymes called the antioxidative enzymes, which then are produced at times of stress and mop up excess free radicals. So yeah, exercise. If you're not used to exercise and you go out and suddenly run a marathon or something, you're going to be creating a lot of free radicals, which could actually do more harm than good. So exercise needs to be graduated. You need to build up a fitness. And when you get to that level of fitness, you will have that level of antioxidant enzymes. So in a way, exercise is an antioxidant because it encourages the antioxidant enzymes to form in response to the free radicals. However, in the elderly and maybe people who are overweight, the process of developing the antioxidant enzymes is slower. So you have to be particularly careful. So taking an elderly person or someone who's overweight and putting them through an intense exercise regime could actually do more harm than good. So you have to be very carefully and have a supervised regime. And at the same time, have all the things which help the formation of antioxidant enzymes. So this is where your polyphenols come in, your healthy minerals come in. So they, minerals like zinc, selenium, copper, they're needed for the antioxidant enzymes. Polyphenols help encourage the polyphenol enzyme formation. They also encourage them to downregulate when they're not needed. So that's why I'm so keen on polyphenols. And in the studies we do, we use food supplements which are rich in polyphenols because they help this sensible production of antioxidant enzymes and switch it off when it's not needed. Unlike, vitamin A and vitamin E and things like that, which are direct antioxidants, which actually you can mop up too many free radicals, and actually you get this thing called antioxidative stress. So when you talk about supplements, I don't talk about vitamin A and vitamin E supplements. I talk about whole food supplements, which is just a way of enhancing the diet rather than taking a chemical out of food, if that.
Yeah, no, then I would love to ask you about polyphenols and phytochemicals. So phytochemicals, phyto means plants and chemicals are chemicals. So they're chemicals that are found in plants mainly. We are talking about it. And polyphenols, could you clarify what they are if our guests don't know about them, and where can they find them?
Yeah, I mean, most athletes, I saw a question just pop up on the chat, know all about phytochemicals because most cyclists or intensive athletes will take a lot of these things because they're putting their body under a lot of strain. And as well as the minerals and vitamins in them, the most important thing in them is the polyphenols and the phytochemicals, which enhance the antioxidative response. So the foods which are got more of them are usually colorful, they've got a nice smell, nice aroma, they look nice. So, berries, green vegetables, tomatoes, herbs, spices, mushrooms. So all the things, to be honest, which look good and taste good. And we need a lot of them. You know, they've been virtually ignored. I mean, I don't know, when you were in medical school, they didn't even mention the word. We talked about vitamins and minerals and proteins, but actually we need large quantities of these every day. They help reduce excess inflammation. They enhance the antioxidative process. They encourage healthy bacterial growth and improve gut integrity. I mean, the list goes on and on. They have epigenetic processes. So the genes which are healthy in our cells, they encourage the expression of those genes, and they help switch off the unhealthy genes. So, you know, they are amazing for us. So yeah, that's, you know, there's a good reason, I hope, that I'm a fan of phytochemicals.
And they do sound delicious, even just from the description. They're colorful, and they're made by nature, as you said, little magical compounds that support our well-being. Just to, if you're talking about eating, what we are eating, there's a lot of questions about fasting. And I loved how you brought up the study that a 13-hour fast showed a 36% lowering risk of breast cancer in five years. Could you tell us a little bit more about fasting?
Yeah, fasting's a difficult subject. You know, we need food. You know, so let's not be scared of food in your program or anyone watching. So, but you know, we do tend to graze as humans. You know, we're always chomping away, and people are scared of having an empty stomach. But actually, it's very good to have an empty stomach at times, because it reverses the insulin pathways, it reduces cholesterol, it reduces, you know, your stomach is resting, so it's not constantly on overdrive having to digest food. And the most convenient time to fast, of course, is when we're sleeping. And there was a very good study published from New York, which looked at women with breast cancer, and those who fasted for 13 hours overnight regularly. So had the evening meal at, you know, for the sake of argument, 7, and they didn't have their breakfast till 8. They had reduced inflammatory markers. They had reduced hemoglobin A1, which is a marker of early diabetes, for example, or diabetic control. And they actually had a reduced relapse rate of their breast cancer. So it's a very simple thing to do, just fasting overnight. And that study's well reported. But also, you know, it depends if you're overweight or not overweight. You know, if you're overweight, fasting is a good way to reduce calories. If you're very underweight, then of course you want to avoid fasting too much, because you need the calories. But there's another interesting paper where if you are normal weight or slightly overweight, if you can have your breakfast early and your evening meal early, and then have nothing after breakfast, and then go for a run on an empty stomach, and then have your lunch, that exercise sort of extends the fasting process. So it's not just about time. You can extend the fasting process by running, because your body's needing the energy, and that gives you the same protection as fasting. So fasting is not, people simplify it, call it the 5-2, you know, it's about every day having a period where you've given your body a break.
And I think for a long time we had these normal fasting periods, but then the snacking came in, the culture of snacking in between, little bars that are easy to buy at any store, and it's easy calorie intake. And there was a culture towards it as well. But I think it's quite important to give a rest to our body and to our pancreas to restart in a few hours, instead of just constantly bombarding it with work. Like us, also our organs are not very happy with continued workload, I think.
Yeah. And it's I mean, even now, I mean, I was watching TV last year, and there was a doctor from Birmingham, I can't even remember, it was a doctor saying we need to eat every 4 hours to keep our our glucose levels. I mean, think of the history of mankind. I mean, you know, the cavemen didn't eat every 4 hours. They had probably when they could catch a wildebeest after running 2 miles to catch it.
Or 24 hours even, just constantly running just to have a little piece of meat or something. I would love to ask you about the dietary toxins. It's a subject that I think is not spoken enough about. And we have quite a lot of dietary toxins. And WHO said that about 20% of cancers are attributed to food toxins, which in this case would be called carcinogens. Carcinogens are things that we eat that cause cancer simply. It also increases disease such as dementia, autoimmune diseases, and arthritis, diseases that we see in our clinical practice every single day.
Yeah.
They overflow even our A&E with acute symptoms. And would love to hear a little bit about the different types of dietary toxins, like acrylamides, heterocyclic amines, and more.
I'll just respond to a question as well. Sorry. Yeah, best time to exercise, usually not first morning, not in late in the evening is the answer to that question, because there's a circadian rhythm benefit from exercising as well. Exercising late at night is probably not good. Anyway, that was a response to a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of, yeah, I mean, we call them carcinogens because I'm an oncologist and this is about cancer, but actually you're very right to point out that you can just call them pro-inflammatory chemicals. Some carcinogens are can directly damage DNA, and others damage DNA by creating chronic inflammation. So, you know, things like radiation or sunlight or some chemicals are directly toxic to DNA. Other chemicals, such as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which you get in, say, burnt meat, they actually set up an inflammatory process. And as we just said, inflammation is carcinogenic. But, you know, we can't avoid all carcinogens. So we need to arm our body to be able to deal with them. But it's a case of load, isn't it? It's called total carcinogenic load or total inflammatory load. So if you start the morning as best you can, you know, and you go out and you get car fumes, you know, but if you started bad and then you have a bad lunch and you have car fumes and you have deodorants and things, you got to look at the overall picture. So what are the categories? There's carcinogens in food and there's carcinogens in the environment. Which one do you want me to start on, or shall I just? I
think environment would be fantastic, as we don't hear much about it.
Yeah, so of the environment we have, let's forget about radiation and sunlight for a minute. Let's talk about things like car fumes, plastics, and estrogenic environment. So the things which are estrogenic would be plastics, car fumes, some foods, and that's why, you know, if you go to the Amazon, you find alligators with small penises, and you get men getting testicular cancer earlier. We think it's one of the reasons why breast cancer is on the increase, and you get these, and that's why we're so concerned about plastics, because plastics have an estrogenic element to it when they're absorbed in the body. And the amount of plastics going into our environment is increasing exponentially, and it still is, despite, you know, being charged 2p for a plastic bag in Waitrose. You know, it is still across the world exponentially increasing, and it's going to lead to more cancers. It's going to lead to infertility. Men are going to lose their libido. So, you know, so if you can get men to make babies, you know, because they're going to be demotivated, they're going to be infertile anyway. So mankind is at serious threat if this estrogenization of the environment continues. And then, so those are the, so it's mainly plastics, car fumes, so deodorants. It's getting better. A lot of deodorants now are taking out the aluminium, and they're taking out the parabens. They're significantly estrogenic. There's a very good author from Reading who did a lot of work on this. It's very hard to prove, and you'll get L'Oreal and all these big companies saying it's not true. You know, it doesn't cause cancer, but there's a lot of correlation between a chronic load over the day increasing your cancer rate, breast cancer rate particularly. But it's very hard to prove it. You can't do a double-blind randomization of a deodorant or not. But most people who know about these things have concerns. And even the San Antonio Breast Cancer Conference, one of the leading talks was about the number of parabens and aluminium women and men are putting on their bodies on a daily basis from a very young age, from 12, 13 until their 70s. I mean, think of the total amount of load you've used. So, my advice to patients is, try to get deodorants and cosmetics and shampoos without these things in. And if they are, just use them sparingly.
So plastic is such a big issue. All the food that we are able to buy nowadays is covered in plastic, and we have plastic in everything that we use. Is there anything that we can do to optimize that? Should we buy food that is not in plastic coverages? We always say, I think plastic bags should have a fee of £100 each because of the price that is attached to it in our health and planetary and human health.
I always split up into two factors. One, personally, so on your personal basis, don't cover food in plastics. Try to ventilate your house, so try to use less cleaning fluids, and if you do use it, make sure the house is well ventilated. Try to use less cosmetics. So that's on a personal basis. But on a national, on global perspective, think twice. If look in your bathroom. There was a nice article in the Sunday Times last week. Looking at the plastic in your bathroom. Look at the shower gels, the shampoo, the conditioners. They're all come in plastic bottles. Try to buy glass bottles. There are some shops now in Cambridge, I noticed, where you have to take your old bottle with you and you refill them. So it's a tip of the iceberg, but if we all get into that habit of just buying less plastic bottles. I mean, if you see a company who are advertising that they don't use plastics and they use biodegradable packaging, try to support them. That in the long term, it's going to be the consumer who makes a change, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Absolutely, and it is in the numbers. We vote with where the money goes. So moving away from plastic will force companies to actually change the practices. Yes, it's easier, but we have looked at plastic. Every bit of plastic that we have ever used or created will forever stay plastic. It will never degrade and will constantly be in our air or in our waters. So it's so important to move away from it and go back to paper or more sustainable ways of transportation. I think we can force them if we really wanted to.
So that's a very good point. Well done.
We certainly try, but we do appreciate it is difficult sometimes. But as you said, it's little things that we can, being aware of it and moving away from anything that we can consciously change. And I love how in your book you're very empowering rather than creating negative feelings about it, because we cannot change everything, but maybe small things, step by step, making conscious decisions can divert us to a little bit of a healthier way of living.
Good message.
Erica?
Right. Hi. So I think we've talked a lot about kind of the development of cancer and the processes underlying it. And today's topic is keeping healthy after cancer. And I wondered, when a patient comes to your clinic, what kind of things do you talk to them about staying healthy or keeping healthy with a cancer diagnosis?
Well, fortunately, pretty much the things which prevent you getting cancer on a population basis are pretty much the same as the lifestyle which would be better to have after cancer. So it's the same, more or less the same thing. So when I talk to patients. Of course, it depends on the timing of the consultation. The initial consultation, they want to know about their disease. Are they going to need surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy? Probably that's not the best time to embark on a lifestyle-y type nagging session or whatever you want to call about it. But you do get an opportunity. I mean, maybe not in casualty, but you do get an opportunity to see your patients again. So we make sure the information materials they have will always have a bit about diet, exercise, what to avoid, what not to avoid. And then in the consultations going forward, we try to introduce, look at their individual situation. So you can't just say everything fits every patient. There might be some patients who are a bit overweight. Other people might have a very high sugar intake. Other people may not exercise much. You might see other patients who might be obviously vitamin D deficient because of the way they dress and the fact they don't go out in the sun. So we try to individualize the advice per patient. And I often start as, how's your diet? Oh, it's fine, doc. But you have got high cholesterol and you're hypertensive, and you're overweight, and now you've got cancer. So maybe we could look at this. Clearly it's not fine, and it hasn't been fine for years. But just nagging them is not going to help. You need to work with them and use your behavioural training to get patients to accept which part of the diet they could change and which part they want to change. And this is where evidence comes in. So if you just say, oh, it's a good idea to lose weight, but if you say, look, there are lots of trials which show if you're overweight, you have a 30% increased chance of relapse, and that relapse could happen within 3 or 4 years. So we're talking about chemo and surgery, but actually, being overweight gives you the same risk factor of not, say, having chemo. So when you put it that way, most people are willing to make some changes. So I haven't really answered your question. I think it depends on the person in front of you was what the advice is. You have to individualize it.
And so on that note, are there things that people should be avoiding? There's a question from Graham and Annette about dietary toxins. I know we've just touched on environmental toxins. Are there things in people's diet that they should be avoiding during this period of treatment? And
most of the randomized evidence, the grade 1 evidence is, exercise, smoking, being overweight, low vitamin D. So that's, those are the hardcore we should all be concentrating on. Then you start getting into, should you be taking vitamins? Should you be taking some supplements? Should you be avoiding pro-inflammatory toxins, carcinogens? It's almost impossible to do a randomized study looking at carcinogens in the diet in people who have cancer. Nobody's done a double-blind randomized trial. But if you look at the common sense, we know you've had chemotherapy. We know that can damage your DNA. You've had cancer already, so you've got a susceptibility. So eating more carcinogens or having a high intake of carcinogens is not sensible. So I go through try to have more plant-based diets. If you have meat, make sure you marinate it in herbs and spices before. Don't fry it on a pan so it gets char grilled, and that black on meat is particularly carcinogenic. It's a combination of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are, in lab studies are highly carcinogenic. So, if you're going to have meat, slow cook it, have it with lots of vegetables, lots of herbs. Go look at all the nutrition you need. You need healthy fats, increase your oily fish intake. You need a right amount of vitamins, particularly vitamin D. So perhaps take an extra supplement in the winter, which I always advise, of vitamin D. Think about your polyphenols. We know how incredibly they are as a cancer preventative. And there's lots of studies actually after cancer that if you increase your polyphenol intake, you have a lower relapse rate. I mean, there's lots and lots of studies which have shown that, and nobody will dispute that data. But, look at your diet. Are you having, mushrooms, tomatoes, wilted spinach with your breakfast, or are you having a bowl of sugar-coated Frosties, which have got no nutritional value and are high in sugar, which is also a thing I concentrate on. Reduce your processed sugar intake. So yeah, there's a way of cleaning up your diet. Mainly plants have less toxins in. Try to get organic food if you can, but don't make it an absolute because it's expensive and difficult to get hold. It's still better to have a vegetable which is non-organic than no vegetable at all. Reduce your meat intake, reduce how you cook the meat. And above all, if you are going to have something bad, have something good with the same meal. The classic example, if you're having a sugary drink, you're having, say, crisps, and you're having some burnt meat, you've had 3 bad things. If you're having a barbecue and you're having a little bit of meat, have a salad with it. Make sure you put, turmeric or pepper on it. You can counterbalance the carcinogen intake. And there's a lovely study from Maryland, which actually did that. It measured the carcinogens in a bloodstream after a barbecue where people had herbs and spices and people who didn't. And almost half the amount of carcinogens were in your bloodstream. So you don't have to sacrifice your diet. You can just be sensible and still enjoy lovely food and reduce your chemical exposure.
And then in your book, you mentioned quite a few striking statistics. There was an Oxford University study that found that eating meat no more than 3 times a week could prevent 31,000 deaths from heart disease, 9,000 from cancer, and 5,000 from strokes in 1 year alone. And the World Cancer Research Fund concluded that if we limited our intake of red meat and stopped eating processed meat altogether, we could save the NHS 1.2 billion a year.
Yeah.
And the third one is that reducing the UK's meat consumption by 30% before 2030 would prevent 18,000 premature deaths every year from heart disease, stroke, dementia, and cancer. I mean, these are quite, they're not small statistics.
Yeah. No, it is just that simple. I mean, I eat meat. But I try to limit it to 3 days a week, which is the WHO recommendations. I think a bit of meat actually is on a health grounds. We're not talking about environmental or ethics here, but on health grounds, a little bit of meat, a couple or 3 days a week is probably good. It keeps your vitamin B12 in. It's got protein. Again, it's a type of meat you eat. Sausages, pork pies. Tinned meat, which we used to eat in the olden days, they're full of carcinogens, they're full of aromatic hydrocarbons, they're full of nitrates, unhealthy nitrates, which are then metabolized into carcinogens in your body. So yeah, there's a way of doing it. And it can't be that bad. I mean, to just cut your meat down to 3 days a week. I mean, for some people, it's like you're speaking a foreign language when you say that. They can't imagine a meat 3 times a day, which is often the case. I was a bit sad in the COVID study, which we've just finished. We were asking people about their dietary habits before, as on baseline, before they had the intervention. And because I suppose I lived in a little closet, middle class, friends who were doctors and things, and people like yourself. We was only 2 patients who were vegetarian in the whole cohort of nearly 200. So most people, and then the next question is, do you eat meat most days? Like 90% of the people in the study said yes, they eat meat every day of their life. And we could do a lot to improve on that as a society, I think.
Yeah, I mean, earlier you mentioned about, eating 4 hours, every 4 hours. And, looking back historically, we didn't eat every 4 hours. And same with meat consumption. We didn't eat meat 3 meals a day, every single day. People would eat meat when they were able to hunt something down, but not on a daily basis. And it wouldn't be the amount that we would be eating in today's society as well.
Yeah, we total excess. Even if you're a trained athlete, you don't need to eat meat every day, that's for sure. Or a bodybuilder, you don't need to eat meat every day.
And I think, from reading your book, it's clear that, plant foods and, increasing fiber intake and plant intake, it's a good thing, regardless of what else you have in your diet.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the large studies like the one we did looking at tea earlier on, look at those. People say, oh, I need strong bones. I'm on hormones which are worried about osteoporosis, etc. Actually, meat intake damages the bones. You get a lower bone density. What increases bone density is a plant-based diet. You're less likely to have a heart attack, less likely to have arthritis, less likely to have dementia. I mean, there's so many different diseases you'd improve if you just limited that simple lifestyle thing. And it doesn't make you stronger. I mean, many tennis players, for example, don't eat much meat because meat can affect the joints, and a lot of sports people put their joints under a lot of strain. So, they can get their protein from plants very easily. As I say, I think the optimum is about 2 or 3 times a week because they can then put their bodies through a higher strain because they're not damaging the joints by eating too much meat.
As Djokovic just said that, well, he has been stating that he has been completely off meat because it's increased. He has been whole food, plant-based for about 6 years now or longer. And he said since then his recovery post-training is much, much faster and he feels much stronger. And the studies are proving that. So if so much money and so many trophies can be won, then eliminating meat and is the key. Then I'm sure he is on the winning streak with that.
Yeah.
And there's, as you said, there's such a delicious vegetables out there and fruits that we are not incorporating every single time we are thinking of eating a Western style diet. It's a time when while we are eating high calorie intake, it's very rarely do we actually feel like eating the abundance of vegetables and plants that our body actually needs.
Well, yeah, there is that there's not only how meat is cooked, the carcinogens within meat. As you say, if there's a big lump of meat on your plate, you're then not eating the vegetables which are packed full of the polyphenols and the refuge and all the other things we need. So it's about exclusion on your plate as well. Interesting though, in the COVID study, I don't know if it's a little quirk, we had people in the long COVID element of our study, actually, the best group were people who had a little bit of meat through the week. The vegans, there seemed to be a slightly higher number of vegans in the long COVID group. And I don't know if that's statistically valid, but I just worry that there might be a group of people who are vegans, for example, who aren't looking after their B vitamins and B12. So if you are going to be vegan, you have to be careful. You have to adapt your diet and make sure you get the range of minerals and vitamins you would get in meat. Be careful. You have to be a little bit more vigilant if you cut out meat completely.
Yeah, and just I think it would be a good time to stress here that being vegan doesn't necessarily mean that people are eating a good quality diet, and having a whole food plant-based diet it's a very varied diet, including all the the different polyphenols that you talk about in your book. Whereas being vegan, you can eat a lot of fast food and be vegan and not have those polyphenols that are beneficial to our health and our immune system.
Yeah, good point.
And talking about the immune system, I just want to touch on microbiome here, which plays a huge role in our health and our immune system. And microbiome can be affected by some of the cancer treatments. So what can people do to protect their microbiome, perhaps before, during, or even after cancer treatment?
No, that's a very good point, and it's a point which has been overlooked, in my opinion. for far too long. I mean, well, we know the things in your diet which help your gut health. So it's eating live food once a day. So have some kimchi, kefir, miso soup, even live cheeses. So try to introduce a little bit of some live food every day. Concentrate on the prebiotics, such as chickpeas, beans, mushrooms, or any polyphenol-rich food, to be honest. So keep that going during your cancer treatment. We know that processed sugar, the pro-inflammatory bacteria or the bad bacteria, they love feeding on processed sugar, whereas the anti-inflammatory or the healthy bacteria, they actually feed on breakdown products encouraged by polyphenol intake. So exercise helps gut health. So all those things are important to continue. But you're right, if you've been taking chemotherapy, radiotherapy, antibiotics, steroids, anti-inflammatories, they can all damage gut health. And a lot of cancer treatments, you take those treatments. So we're constantly damaging patients' gut health. And it's very important because we know now when you go onto these biological treatments, which recruit the immune system to recognize a cancer cell as foreign and attack it, if your immune system is low, they don't work. And that's been proven. I mean, that's already been proven. If you have low gut health, these biological treatments, there's a 40% less chance of a response. And when you take them, you're more likely to get toxic effects from them. So you're likely to get lung disease, lung toxicity, bowel disease. And there was a great case report recently of someone who went straight onto these biologicals, no prehabilitation, no talk of gut health. She ended up in intensive care for 6 weeks, came out, went back to the oncologist, had a response, and the oncologist said, well, we'll re-expose you. She, on her own back, went and took some probiotics, did all the things to improve gut health, went back onto the same treatment, tolerated it fantastically, 2 years later, still in remission. But that patient themselves had to go and do that, despite the knowledge. But it is getting more recognized now. And if it was up to me, we'd have a prehabilitation program to enhance gut health before taking any of these treatments. The role for probiotics during chemotherapy is becoming more apparent. It's not as easy as just going to Boots and buying a probiotic over the counter and saying my gut health's going to be perfect. But if you are in a situation where you feel you've got bloating, you've got intermittent constipation and diarrhea, you're getting fatigued, you're getting indigestion, you probably have a poor gut health. And amongst the other things I've just said, to take a good quality probiotic for a short period of time, in my opinion, is beneficial. But we need more research on that, of which ones are the best. For the Phyto-V COVID intervention study, we picked one called Your Gut Plus because it was a particularly good profile of lactobacillus, which are the safer ones. And we combined that with inulin prebiotic, mainly because we didn't want one of these type, which have got hundreds of colony forming units and lots of different types of probiotic. We wanted to keep it simple, and that showed a good benefit. And there are studies of people who've had capecitabine on different types of chemotherapy, which cause diarrhea, but taking a probiotic can reduce the risk. So we know there's a role, but that research really needs to be expanded. And I think in the next sort of 5-10 years, there'll be a lot more research in taking probiotics before treatments to enhance their effects.
You touched on prehabilitation there, and that's a new concept to a lot of people. People are more familiar with rehabilitation after hospital stay or surgery or something like that. So can you just briefly explain what prehabilitation means and why that is important?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively new thing. The Royal College of Anaesthetists started an initiative about 2 years ago, mainly looking at exercise, to be honest. So if you're going to go in for your bowel cancer operation in a couple of weeks, instead of sit there worrying, you've got to get out, exercise. And we know that if you do exercise, you're going to have less chance of thromboembolism, which is a very serious side effect of cancer treatments, much more than people realize. You're going to leave hospital earlier, you're less likely to get an infection. The problem is there need to be more guidance for patients. They need to be put into a formal program rather than just say go for a walk, because we know it doesn't tend to happen. And there's a private unit called Genesis Care now, which is just a private unit, which have a gym attached to their radiotherapy unit. So patients come in for exercise programs before they even start treatment, and they continue it during it. So it's very much in its infancy, but I would like, if it was up to me, I would like every hospital to have a prehabilitation unit, so people, have an intense supervised exercise before their surgery. And also, leading on to diet change, we know that if you've got a good gut health, you're less likely to have an infection in hospital, you're less likely to get one of these super bugs. So look at their gut health, and I think taking a probiotic supplement for a short period of time, in some people before they get admitted to hospital, would also be a good idea. Again, very much in its infancy, but it's going to change. You watch this space. It's going to be a big thing over the next 5 years, I think.
So nutrition and exercise are both really important when somebody is going through cancer treatment, well, in prevention and also going through cancer treatment. And actually looking at a lot of the side effects from cancer treatment, such as, we talked about chemotherapy, because that targets a lot of the faster growing cells in our body. So things like skin, nail, and hair, they get affected the most during these treatments. And actually, from reading your book, the things that people can actively do to reduce these side effects include good nutrition and exercise as well. I wonder what advice you would give to people who are going through treatment, are very fatigued, and how do you encourage them to exercise, or what kind of guidance do you give?
It is, it's not as easy as we all think. What it's like when you've got a flu or something. Having chemo, it feels pretty much the same. It's pretty hard to motivate yourself. So I do say, try to do keep yourself as mobile as possible. So try to go for a walk, but rest as well. Don't be afraid to have an afternoon kip or anything like that. Try to do more exercise or more movement in the morning, outside in the sun, to get your circadian rhythm. We know circadian rhythm is very important for cancer treatments. And then on your good days, try to push it. The problem is, if you're not used to exercise and you exercise, you actually do get more fatigue afterwards. But it's like all things, you have to push through that and do it regularly, and eventually, over a long period of time, you will get fitter and you will get less fatigue. And that's why a supervised exercise program is very good, because it encourages you. That's why exercising with other people is good for the social interaction, and also emphasizing on, if you are exercising, if you're not used to it, you need to have lots of polyphenol rich foods, because they will prevent the excess free radical formation of when you're exercising, which you're not used to. And for example, the POMI-T study, which we did for prostate cancer, we're now using that supplement in a study with Bedford University, where we're actually giving people that before an exercise regime or placebo, and we're measuring joint health, actually, and oxidative stress, to see if just a simple dietary maneuver will encourage people, will enhance their ability to exercise. So when you exercise, you have to stop because your joints are hurting, for example. You could take that, and if you don't get those side effects, you're more likely to then do it the second time. So that study's sort of on hold because of COVID. It's just restarting now, and that might be a practical bit of advice patients could do. They could take a supplement, encourage them to exercise, and they get all the benefits of exercise.
I feel like we can speak to you for ages and ages. I'm just noticing the time. You've got such a wealth of knowledge. And I do want to ask one last question about nitrates, actually. Nitrates in plants and nitrates in meat, and how they're both nitrates.
Yeah.
And we know that nitrates in plants are really good because they get converted into nitric oxide, and it helps with endothelial function and vasodilation. So what's the difference between them?
Yeah. Well, meat has nitrates, but lots of other carcinogens. So if they only had nitrates, meat wouldn't be so bad. But nitrates, I don't know if you saw the diagram, if you don't, with it, because meat doesn't have any polyphenols and things, if you eat meat on its own, those nitrates are going to be metabolized into aromatic hydrocarbons, which are carcinogens. If you eat meat actually with herbs and spices or vitamin C or polyphenols, that even nitrates within meat are then metabolized into nitric oxide, which is good for you because it's vasodilation, drops your blood pressure, and helps to feed healthy cells. So even nitrates in meat can be converted into nitric oxide, which is good for you, as long as you eat it with lots of vegetables and polyphenols.
Right, okay.
Professor Thomas, I must ask though, if these are carcinogens in meat and we have to combine meat with some plants to counterbalance it, especially in someone who has had cancer and is worried about having it again. First, do we know how much plants we would actually need to eat to counterbalance the carcinogenic effects of meat and the inflammatory effects of eggs? If we know that there is a possibility that they can push a patient to have cancer the second time, because we already know that they have the genetic predisposition to have it, wouldn't it be safer to advise to them to eat more of the foods that can, and we know, protect them from it, rather than balancing out and hoping that we eat enough plants to counter-affect the carcinogenic effects and the inflammatory effects of eggs and meats?
Yeah, it's difficult to quantify this, and that's why obviously diet is number one, but that's why I do, and most of my trials as a scientist, I'm doing on food supplements, because in a study you can quantify the food a bit more. But I'm not ever suggesting a supplement to replace the diet. But as a general rule, we need much more than you think, actually. So you need to have these vegetables with every single meal. But a supplement is a way of, if you take a supplement with your breakfast, for example, the POMI-T study had green tea, broccoli, turmeric, pomegranate. It's not something people have in a British diet for breakfast. So you could just take a supplement which has got the whole food, and even with the pomegranate, it's got the seed ground up. So it's packed full of healthy whole foods, packed full of phytochemicals and polyphenols. You can take it with the lunch. So that, I think the reason why those supplements work is you've boosted the polyphenol phytochemical intake right from the time you get up in the morning. And that gives you protection throughout the day. You could probably do it with a diet as well. I mean, certainly you can do it with a diet as well. But, a lot of people have days where they're not so good. We all do. We can't eat healthily every day. So a supplement would make sure you at least get some healthy things every day, particularly in times of the day when we don't traditionally have them, such as first thing in the morning. So with the COVID study, we're using a supplement. With prostate cancer, we use a supplement. With the exercise study, we're using a supplement. So, a good quality supplement, there is a role. I mean, they are still foods, don't forget, but there is certainly a role. And I think that's where certainly nutritional, a lot of effort's been put in nutritional research looking at good quality supplements.
Mm-hmm. But if we are really wanting to protect ourselves as much as possible, would it be all right to say that meat consumption could be cut out with a whole food plant-based diet, especially for those who do not want to bring the carcinogens into their lives and are worried that maybe they are not balancing their plants and vegetable and fruit intake to counter-affect the carcinogenic effect of animal products?
I totally agree. Meat and how it's cooked and the environmental problems which caused by meat production, is a massive priority. But things like dairy, people say I won't touch dairy. a little bit of milk now and again in your tea and coffee is absolutely fine on a medical perspective. Eggs, as you quoted in my book, eggs, if they're free-range chickens and they've eaten bugs, and you eat eggs with plants, the slightly pro-inflammatory effect of eggs will be counterproductive. So, yeah, meat is definitely one of the things to concentrate on, amongst other things.
Thank you so much. Before we have only a short time for our cozy group chat, because we had so much to cover, and what an incredible chat. And all of this you can read more about in How to Live by Professor Thomas. This book is out now, and it's out also on audiobook if you want to listen to it. We really enjoyed it, and if you want a bit more technical, if you don't mind sharing this, I really enjoyed this as well. Keep Healthy After Cancer. Fantastic books, and they highlighted a lot of topics that we were keen to dig a little bit deeper. And before we move on, could we ask you 3 actionable and practical takeaways that our listeners can implement right away to take control of their health in summary?
Exercise 3 hours a week, cut out processed sugar, particularly in the morning. Think about your fruit and veg and polyphenol intake, and magnify it by 5 and take those, and look after your vitamin D. Make sure you get some extra vitamin D in the winter. I think that's the first 3 or 4, but there's a lot more after that.
Especially here in the UK in the winter, and if you're an NHS worker, you won't see the sun. So D vitamin is super important. You give so generously with your time and your knowledge to inspire us, and we would love to direct our listeners to your website as well, which we thought was phenomenal to get more information. We're gonna put the website link into the chat and also on our YouTube channel. So keephealthy.com, cancernet.co.uk. The blog is phenomenal, blog.cancernet.co.uk, and I think our listeners can follow you on Twitter and Facebook as well, and also on Instagram right now, on CancerNet Instagram, and Twitter as well is CancerNet UK. And
yes, I think it's CancerNet UK is the common name for all of them. The healthy.com is not my website, but I'm asked to write a lot of things on it, whereas the cancernet.co.uk is mine, as you can see, because it's much more amateur. It's actually my own.
No, it's fantastic. It has so many great articles and blogs on it that we use to prepare for the interview, and so much that we can share with our patients. So thank you for taking the time to write them. Thank you so much, Professor Thomas, for coming today. Next Sunday, we are very pleased to be screening the documentary Code Blue on Afternoon Tea with Docs. Do stay connected with us on social media and say hello on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The links we will pop in the chat below.
Please do comment in the chat your thoughts and feedback about today's session. And for those of us watching on YouTube, do let us know how we're doing as well. And we will now stop recording.